a couple different pieces. So if I'm making like an 808 or whatever like that, I'm gonna have like a really quick envelope on a, could be a sawtooth, it could be a sine wave as well. Then you have a noise oscillator, which also has its own envelope. This could be like the end of the equation if you want to go and start processing stuff, but you can also run it through a high pass filter. So we can just run a regular high pass. So we have short envelopes for everything pretty much. So in order to give it more punch, we have the pitch envelope. So every single drum that you're going to design is pretty much based around this element here. So transient envelopes or just strike envelopes, however you want to phrase it. But they're really quick and they're really sharp. Okay, so let's get some MIDI going on here. So I'm just going to kind of like put together like a snare really quick here, just so we kind of just talk about the process so you guys just see it, I guess. At some point, I think I would want to kind of like elect some people to kind of like be in like a class or whatever, and then we can kind of like have like a back and forth. If some people want to be part of that, so I can kind of like either be on Discord at the same time. We can kind of like discuss and I kind of like open the floor for, you know, questions or whatever like that. I think that could be cool. Okay. So just putting that together without really listening to it yet. But that's pretty much a really basic 808 snare. It's a little bit too much of the pitch, so we want a really small amount of that. And then we can resonate this again, and let's send the noise through the filter as well. And we can create another filter envelope, or we can use the pitch envelope, depends on what you're trying to do. I tend to use two just so I can have like a couple different like versions of this kind of like strike or transient envelope. So, you know, envelope, just one playthrough, you know, BPM, BPM sync off. So it's just running free. And then it's got to be really quick. Right. So when we go and resonate this point right here, I can actually key track it and then have kind of the whole pitch of the snare be based around the high pass or whatever other peak I decide to put into it. I can add another peak to the high pass with a multi filter. Then we have this peak here. I can add, you know, like two peaks. I can sharpen them out and then resonate both of them and move them both around. Kind of like I would a talking growl bass. So that gives us a lot more like body to the snare. And if you check through the guide on the section about like 909s and 808s, there are these two different harmonics in the actual signal flow. So they're pretty much like injecting like sine waves with fixed frequencies at these specific spots. But since we have a lot of different creative filters, now we can just kind of do it right here. Don't need to worry about that. Everything in those sound on sound guides are going to be kind of like based around how do I do it exactly like it is in the module itself. Most people who are like synthesis enthusiasts or synth enthusiasts are kind of like, they won't pay for things that don't do that, pretty much. It's like, well, okay, that's cool, but why would I buy this for whatever if it doesn't do exactly what the original does? That's why like Able 303, I don't know if anybody has this plugin or knows about this plugin. I audio realism. Really, 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 really good 303 emulation. So this one is almost to, spec of the actual 303. So highly recommend if you're trying to get something like this, get this one. And then it has like another interface and all this other shit you can modulate. So really cool shit. Yeah, so this is kind of like a 808, can be kind of like a trap, random, different types of like percussive snares. And then you can kind of like record it, fill it out, do whatever you want to it. If you're trying to build patches, sometimes I will put compression in the signal flow here. I also do like to put a low pass at the end of the chain just so I can kind of like soften it up and make it feel just a little more organic. Just because when I feel or when I hear, perfect noise on top, stuff in real life doesn't have that kind of like flat curve, so there would be some kind of fall off to it. So just like a soft low pass is pretty chill. And then, some like hyper compression. Put around here. All right, so it sounds pretty good. A little bit more body. So this is becoming more of like a 909 snare now. So I can add a little bit more noise, which will be the snares to it. So a little bit less than that. So I'm gonna sharpen the curve here, so I can have a little bit more whip to the transient. Extend this out. Okay, so I do want a little bit of tail there. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna add release, and then I'm gonna push release here on envelope 3. I'm gonna pull back the decay. Sweet. Yeah, so that sounds pretty good. Just for, a basic sine wave into a high pass filter. So, this could be used for a lot of different things now. At this point, with, how loud the transient is and how percussive it is, it could be used in dubstep. It could also be used as a layer in, actually, no, it could be used as a snare in drum and bass or halftime. Just because those have a lot less low end than a dubstep snare would have. Dubstep snares have a ton of low end because they kind of need to fill out the mix when they come in with the mix. So usually what will be like a 909 snare, over processed, which we'll kind of talk about in a minute. And then also layers of different things like claps and whatever else. If you've ever listened to like a actual Vengeance sample or any of those other samples like that, and kind of like thought like, okay, well, how would I make my own? Just kind of like listen to all the pieces inside of the sound, just kind of like, I guess, listen to it on loop, and you can kind of like dissect it every single time you hear it. It's kind of the way I listened to music when I was like learning how to play bass. It's like I listened to one song over and over and then just listen to the bass part, as opposed to listen to the entire song. And it really gives you a different perspective on the song, especially if you're, actually trying to play that thing. It doesn't, really make that much sense, separated from it. But when it comes all together, it kind of like is super cohesive and kind of allows you to understand how the layering should go. So yeah. And then also like experiment with different, waveforms. I'm going to keep that waveform, but also different noise timbres as well. And you can do all types of shit. These are like actual like harmonic noise samples here, so you can try that. Yeah, so all of them kind of different. Literally changes the snare. Yeah, then they also have a ton of different attacks as well. So they kind of prep you to make different drums in here, especially if you're going to go and start to layer things. So we didn't really talk about this so much in the last class, but yeah, this is where it's, if you're trying to go and just like start layering with samples, this is really, really crucial to just have actual pieces of like loops or whatever that you want to go and stack on top of it to make it sound like it's sampled, like layering a hi-hat or a, again, like clap, whatever, can pretty much just like make it cut through the mix. Say if you're doing like a dubstep snare, sometimes you can just layer a kick attack under the entire thing and just give it a ton of weight. This one's weird. Let's pull this back and then we'll pull this back a little bit. All right, we're gonna extend this. Put this in one-shot mode. It's looping. I like the hi-hat cuts a little bit more. And then when you pitch them down, it can kind of give like a lo-fi kind of flavor to it. I kind of like that too. All personal preference. But yeah, so that's kind of like the most basic path I can show you that you can go and take and then make whatever out of it. So just go and do whatever with that. Okay, so now we're moving on. Okay, so let's start talking about sampling the snares. So we got 808s and 909s. So I'm gonna start with just the straight up samples. Obviously, a ton of different ways you can go and make an 808 snare because those are all technically 808 snares. When in reality, they're kind of like different layered sampled versions of 808 snares. They're not exactly 808 snares. Like this is definitely a clap layered on top of this 808. Oh my god, sweet spam, bro. Okay, so let's load up the 909 too. All right, so this is going to be really, really messy. So these are actual like recorded samples from these electronic drum kits. So, I mean, if you're looking for something like that, instead of spending, a couple $1,000s on a module like that, I highly recommend just finding a sample and then processing that. Okay, so let's start with the 808. So, when you're working with a sampler and a sample, you can kind of treat this, just like you would a synthesized, you know, snare or whatever. Except now, literally, it's just going to be playing a snare sound. But, adding a filter and adding the envelope to that filter to make it snap will definitely help it. It's not going to detract from this snare. So then if we add a pitch envelope to go and, increase the punch of the transient is also going to help. So none of those things are going to detract from the overall kind of balance of the snare, just kind of give you a different flavor. So pretty much like almost everybody gets their start doing random drum design this way. Almost if not all people start making like drum and bass and dubstep using these types of like 909 process snares, including like electro sounds as well. Those are heavily based around the 909. So yeah, it's a lot of really good spots to kind of start from just using those things as a starting point, not as like a ending point in terms of, I'm just going to drop this 909 snare and I'm done. If you're doing a genre specific thing that's asking for that, like house, different styles of house, like techno or tech house or whatever, then yeah, sure. But there's probably some kind of like flavor you're going to give to it that gets it kind of like dialed and mixed, whatever. I know a lot of like house producers that really have like, I don't know, a preference on 909 hats for whatever reason. It's like, oh yeah, just like they just like the way where they're placed in the mix. They like the timbre. It's just all of it. Yes, y'all be spamming up in that chat. It's hilarious. Okay, so we're just gonna be kind of messing with this for a second. Okay, so that's super pitched down. So let's put this in a drum rack. Perfect. Okay, so we have the high pass, so we can start with any of these, the OSR, MS2, SMP, whatever. If you're in any other sampler, you can see if they have, other colored types of filters, or try to put a filter on there that is colored. You can even use something like Volcano. We can even check that out in a second. But yeah, so for the moment, we'll just use this. Want to push the resonance as well. Let's just look at this section here. And then center it around where the low end of the snare is going to be. So half the time I ended up like actually tuning my snares this way and creating a pitch where there wasn't any. So I tend to kind of like start here if I'm going to be starting with a sample or whatever. On the copyright sample topic, would it still be copywritten if you comp two splice samples together? Two splice samples together, like splice the outlet, or did you splice two samples together? Because if they're sold on splice, they have been sold on splice and they do not own them anymore, so that there it's all you. So to that point, that's a good question. So it has to be transformative. So transformative has a lot of different, um, perspectives on it. Does it interfere with the original works? Is it saying the same thing? Like, does it change the message that was already there, or is it using that message? So if like somebody's hook line is something you sampled and you're splicing two different hook lines together, but they're the same pitch as the original, it's like you can't do that because it's somebody's performance. So it's somebody singing it. They have rights to the words that they sang in that recorded works. If they've given out the acapella for remix, they still own it. But now they've given it out for remix. So that means anybody can use it. A lot of rap artists will do that. So people will DJ using their acapellas. So you can drop whatever track, any genre, literally any genre, and then just drop Cardi B acapella on top. You can be at a psytrance rave. All of a sudden, Cardi B's on a psytrance track. That would be super impressive, to be honest. But yeah, so you just pretty much have to transform the original works. You can't just piece two pieces together and then get away with the, copyright infringement because, yeah, if the waveform is not physically mangled, and they would have to go and reverse engineer the shit out of that in order to find it. It's beyond repair. They're not going to be able to find it using an algorithm. Nobody's going to be able to prove that in court. So if you want to just, final point about that, I guess. Perfect example of like where copyright becomes like the super weird gray area is like the Tom Petty Sam Smith case where Sam Smith lost for I think "Stay with Me" uh, for the modulation that went da, da, da. So Tom Petty went da, 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 as well, and his estate noticed that, and they were just like, "You copied him," and made a case in court and won. So I don't know if Sam Smith's producers were like, "Yo, let's copy Tom Petty, don't back down," or just happened to use the same three notes, which very possible. Yeah, that is splitting hairs big time, and they shouldn't have won that case, in my opinion. But yeah, that's one of those things where it's like, do they have rights to the modulation? In essence, yes, because Tom Petty's estate will pretty much copyright every little piece about the track. It's like costs a lot of money to copyright one track, which is like $100. That's a lot of money because you're literally just getting rights to it, not even every other part of the process. So if you go and double down on that, you can go and pay for more copyrights to all the pieces of the track, including modulations in the melody. Jay-Z's tried to copyright Yup, and that's not a joke. That's 1000% fact. Yup. Like, I can't do that. Yup. I can get sued for that, dude. Yup. I shouldn't be doing that right now. My Twitch stream is going to get shut off. Just kidding. He didn't win. He can't copyright that. He said yup. Can't copyright that, Jay-Z. Sorry, dude. All right. Anyways, so best rule though, what my business teacher told me, how many seconds of anything can you sample and get away with? 0. So if you have that question ever, no. It's no. It's definitely a no. But no. It's like, but I did this? No. You got away with it. That's it. You can transform it to the point of no return. If they went and found out you used that, they could still use a case against you. So it's like, it's just, you got to split the hairs deep enough to go and find like link to the original. So we like copyright as smaller artists or artists making music that we put on SoundCloud because we can claim IP. And so intellectual property law is like, that's a little bit more human rights based than anything, because you've made a works, meaning a track, and you put that works up on SoundCloud, which makes it finalized, and you've done it. That's yours. You're the first person to do that thing. And the original IP, intellectual property, was created, so you made it on your system that you bought, paid for, in your house, in your everything about where you made this thing is yours. And everything I just said literally matters. Why? Because say if you were to develop an app and you worked for Google and you developed this app on your laptop, but in Google's cafeteria. Now Google is like, when did you make that app? You made it on your lunch break in our cafeteria? Guess what? We own your app now. And they could get you on, you made it using our electricity and our Wi-Fi and like a server. So like they'll just get you on all the little things that, potentially weren't yours along the way to go and claim pieces of that, which is how it goes. Last example is like, don't sample reggae, because reggae artists will, their estate, like Bob Marley's estate, will pretty much take claim to the work as a whole, which means the entire album that you potentially sampled Bob Marley on, they'll just take ownership of all of that. I give that example just because it's pretty blatant, because they're pretty much saying that Bob Marley has this much reputation that you just sampling him will get this global market that Bob Marley is, which is just weed. So it's like, he's the weed man. Beyond that, he's like the symbol of hope of Jamaica, so it's like, There's a bunch of things to Bob Marley's legacy that he will never gain relevance from you sampling him. Doesn't matter who you are. Um, he will only lose relevance because now people are just allowed to sample him. So it's just like that's the precedent they have to set. It's literally just a precedent. Yeah, you can sample Bob Marley as much as you want. But yeah, if you tried to sell it and tried to be that, tried to sell it while being Jay-Z, Jay-Z would have to forfeit the entire album he released that Bob Marley sample on. Oh no, you're good. Yeah, chill in the spam, bro. Okay, so kind of stepping back in here, going from sampling here, which is a really good topic of conversation just because we're talking about sampling stuff. Um, I've met a lot of different producers over the course of my career or whatever, and a lot of people from around the world having different perspectives on this. And I have met people who have told me to cut pieces of other producers' shit out of their tracks and just use it. And um, being a younger person at that time, I was just like, well, I guess if this guy said it's fine. And I just think about it for a second. I was like, well, I don't like it, so I'm not going to do that. Like, I wouldn't really want somebody to do that to my shit. So I'm not going to really disrespect somebody else's shit like that. But also, if like somebody gave you a snare, it's fine. But like, if you're going and sampling cheese snares and then using cheese snares in your tracks, that's cringe. So don't do that. Like, if you went and sampled Skrillex's growl bass, put that in your track, don't do that. It's cringe. So, just food for thought. Okay, so gonna give this a little bit more punch here. So I'm gonna add envelope. So this is gonna over resonate. SMP, I believe, doesn't have a limiter, or it might be PRD that doesn't. Right, so around about, about 50 milliseconds, pretty good. All right, so this you can kind of do the same thing with, although if we're gonna be a little more drastic with it, we want to base it around kind of the low end of this snare. So now we're gonna resonate more low end into the snare. So before you have that going on, it's gonna give it a little bit more punch. I also like to take the sustain out of my percussion samples just so I'm only playing the one shot. You can also put it in one shot mode and turn it on and fade out as well. Stuff I'll do as well, but this works. So I like that. So it just gives you a lot of more control over just the transient here. So say if you're in like audio, you can literally do this with controlling the like Beats algorithm or anything like that, and like trimming that back and just making the transient literally shorter. So I'll do that well before I go and try to do something with compression when I'm working with electronic music. If I'm working with like analog, whatever, recording a drum set or whatever, I'll try to make it as punchy and even as possible, just so it blends together and everything kind of works. Because you want the room in every single mic as well to kind of like sum together and give this like really nice image of your drum set and not just like a super isolated punch thing. That could be cool in different environments, but overall, if you're going to do stuff like electronic music, like breaks and R&B, whatever, you're not really looking for that. You're looking for a really, really clean room sound. If anybody's curious on what that would sound like, I guess check out like Tony Royster Jr. or any kind of gospel drummer. We can probably check out a video at some point here. But yeah, so definitely good ones to check out there. But yeah, so high pass into this. So we're just using the 808 again and take off all this stuff. So other things I could potentially layer onto this. So let's get a little bit more deep into this. So if I'm going to layer something on top of a snare, it's usually going to complement it in some way. So we got two different things that pretty much are a given. There literally is a word for it, like a clare, which is a clap snare. So a dubstep snare is a clare. It's just a really big one and a heavy one. So you can have like, other things like that, like a snap as well. That was the next point. So like snaps and claps. So when you're in Ableton, you can hold down Command and just drag and drop on top of the sample, and it'll just create a little instrument rack for you. So I tend to go and do this, and it's kind of the easiest way for me to go and do it. And then next step, say if I want to go and like just start layering these things together. So I have this other snap in there now. So I'm going to turn this off classic mode. Or I'm sorry, turn off one-shot mode and go into classic mode. All right, so I hear a little bit of the flavor of the snaps in there. And that gives me like a room. Literally widens out the snare just having the snap in there. So adding a clap will give like another image that layers and kind of expands this snare, which is kind of what I want. I'm going to push this a little bit more, get a little bit more drive into it. Okay, so now if I want to create some space between these two, trick you can do is if the envelope has a delay, you can just do it there. But if you don't have that, you can use any delay to do this. 100% wet and then 0 feedback. And any of these is fine. So I'll turn off the filter if I just want it to just do its thing. No modulation whatsoever. And pretty much you just use this as a delay, like a physical just pre-delay for the onset of the actual snap. So I can push it back in time or, after this snare by 21 milliseconds. Right. So we can layer a bunch of shit now without having to go and draw all these different MIDI notes and kind of flam them together. So this creates the flam, and that is an actual word. So flam is kind of like a onset of notes that kind of like flam into one strong transient. So you can kind of like roll a single, snare hit on top of it. So I'd like to do this with things that kind of complement the transient of the snare, don't get in the way of the pitch. So they're just going to expand the mid-range and the higher frequencies of everything. So we can do that with other things too. We don't just have to do that with this, layers of samples and all that shit. So let's kind of go deeper into that theory now, or that thought. So audio effects racks, super cool for this. But I suppose you can do this in buses or any other way you can do this inside of a, other DAW that you have. If you don't have access to audio effects racks like this, you could use multipass, but there's also Blue Cat Audio. Blue Cat Audio is probably the multi-patcher is probably the best version of that for every other DAW, because it's literally an audio effects rack. That's what it does. But yeah, multipass is super cool for that too. So let's take this transient and process it a couple ways. So I'm just going to right click, create chains. This is going to be my dry chain, and it's going to be my affected chain. So in this process chain, I'm going to add some frequency shifting, and I'm going to add erosion. So we're going to add fixed frequency modulators to kind of give it more flavor. And if you don't have a noise modulator like erosion, which this is all this is, you can use stuff like FM8 or anything else that you can kind of like piggyback on top of like plugin just in line with it. So we're going to get a frequency shifter. So frequency shifters, when it's in shift mode, and it is in like the full range high frequency mode, you can also shift it in fine amounts over here as well. It's going to give you a lot of pitch. So just kind of listen to that really quick. So we'll literally pitch up the sound. Let's get that original one. So I can pitch it down or pitch it up. Now I'm going to add more snares. Okay, so where do I like it? Well, obviously, you can use this as drastically and as crazy as you want. So, in a different environment, we would be using this as just like a pitch shifter. So, we can use like multipass for pitch shifting like that. Pitch shifting is granular though. So, this is not like a one-to-one run thing through, pitch it up, do the thing. Pitch shifters do take a copy of the sound and then spit it out. So, it does have a little bit of delay to it. If you're thinking about why I do this, just go literally to the guide and look at the signal flow of a 909 and an 808 snare, and they have this in every single one of them. This is how they add like all these, different like harmonics into the snare in order to give it like more weight, pitch down, give it more layers. I can do this as many times as I want. This is stock plugin too. And then, kind of like give it width. I can literally stack this version of one snare multiple times. So again, like we can do this with 909 snare too. So the 909 snare, the entire construction of a 909 is based around this theory right here. So what they're doing is like fold back distortion. So fold back distortion is not like your typical distortion. It can reduce harmonics as well, phase them out of existence. So like the whole guide is based around sawtooth waves kind of being folded back to the point where they become sine waves again. And then they get filtered out and then frequency shifted, ran through high pass filters, and then summed back together. Ironically, that's the cheapest way to do that. Back then. Nowadays, you just do something like what Roland did for the Iris series, which is literally just a digital brain. None of the signal flow whatsoever. So they were doing like, PCIe circuit boards and stuff. So kind of like handmade stuff. A lot of stuff they had to do there. A lot of modules they had to build around just for cost sake. So the sawtooth is kind of like the easiest one for them to use. Okay, so let's kind of expand on this thought a little bit more. So this is going to be unity pitch. I can pitch this down. It could be a lower layer. Then I can get myself a higher layer too. Can harmonize it by ear. So the higher layers though, I tend to think about higher things in like stereo field. So low ends up the middle, mids up the mids, highs up the sides. So it's kind of like how I think about it. Grains does equal gains. And grains. Yeah. The first thing ever to like to Stosie's point about the microchip, the first thing ever to have that inside of it was a wavetable synth. So sample and hold literally created the idea of like, what if we ran stuff through things and then we're able just to hold that waveform as opposed to just generating the waveform. And so, that expanded into a lot of other things like samplers, like the way they are now, which is super high resolution. Think about If anybody out there is trying to get into lo-fi stuff and you're thinking, hey, I want to be like Jay Dilla, then you should go and look into SP1200s because pretty much he recorded everything on that. So I'll go check out that. SP1200 has a caveat though that it is 12-bit, meaning that it doesn't have certain frequencies above about 10 to 12K. So it's kind of like a tape version of digital. So it's the limitation that tape has too. So it's a little bit darker. And because of that, it has more headroom for the low end. So they tend to be a little bit weightier and a little bit, darker. So SP1200 pretty much across the board is sampled. So it's just like a very sample based drum machine. So the actual construction of it and the limitations of it does give it its sound though. So if you open up battery 3, there's like SP1200 algorithms for the sample and hold and actual algorithm for that too. And Contact also has that too. These are very expensive because they have all that legacy, just like the 808 and the 909. And if you are trying to buy something like that, I would only recommend buying an SP404. SP404s are fucking sick. Highly recommend getting one. Probably about $400, $400 or $500. Super reasonable. I've seen people throw sets off of them. That's how cool they are. You can just do all of your shit directly in them. No, so it's not about the errors. It's pretty much the limitation of like the streaming of it. So think of it like softer than MP3. It doesn't sound as shitty as MP3. It's not like truncating it in that way. Because it has that limitation, they filter it. They filter it hard. So it is dark. Yeah, totally Stosu. There has been so many killer sets done on a 404, at low end specifically. I mean, too many to name. I think DiBiase is probably my favorite. DiBiase is just amazing. Yeah, Ross G. Yeah, Ross used to. Oh man, that was such a vibe. Ross G used to chill there all the time. I smoked so many blunts with Ross G. It's kind of funny. R.I.P. Okay, so what I was talking about before diverging there and talking about all that other stuff, it's kind of like layering in stereo field here. So we have the 3 layers. It's going to be like our original. We have our low and we have our high. So I can make this low. We'll go utility just for this. But for whitening, I'll go to a couple different things. We can go like stereo imager, straight up like ozone shit. There's no problem with using that stuff. But also we can use chorusing. We can use delays in general in order to do that. So probably just going to use a chorus on this. And the way I use the chorus in this scenario is going to be 0 modulation. So amount down at 0. Probably no feedback. And we're just going to use these as kind of like 2 different copies of the signal. And pull down the high pass too, so I can get full resonance on this on both versions of it. And we'll just turn off. Actually, we'll go fixed here. Okay, so what I'm doing here is first I kind of like balance out the flam and I'm just kind of listening for like a really subtle thing. I'm not really listening for a lot because what's going to happen is when I go and push the amount here with no feedback, it's going to kind of blur the image and kind of gently modulate left and right. You can make it fast and you can multiply the signal so you can actually resonate it as well. That's kind of cool, actually. But yeah, so right about here though is where I do like on a chill day. So I just want a little bit of the stereo fill left and right. Then we layer that with the original. Cool. All right, so we don't want to finish there. This is pretty much just like different ways to get more out of the actual snare itself. So again, you can just go and apply this to any snare. You know, it's just like starting point across the board. If you're looking for somewhere to start, that's easy. It's like the 808, 909. So we're going to do some processing now. And before I go into OTTs, because we are going to go there, we're going to go glue compressor and saturation. All right, so first thing that I look for when I'm like trying to process something is like, you know, I don't really ask myself the question, but I'm just like thinking to myself, I guess, is it better or is it just louder? So first thing I want is to make it as loud as I want it to actually be, you know, so I'm not trying to process it to the point where it's just loud. I want to raise volume and then start to process around my kind of normalized version of the sound. Cool. Okay, so we can also do a couple other things to this higher layer as well, because we have more noise in it as well. And so like dimension expanding, again, with like the chorusing stuff is pretty good for this. This is actually one of the only times I will use like dimension expander like this. I thought I had this installed. Must have gotten wiped when I was like fixing my VSTs. That's annoying. All right, we're gonna get serum effects here. Okay, so I'm just gonna use the serum effects chain. All right, so we're gonna use hyper and dimension. So this is just to create like a little bit of slapback and early reflections. So we want to create like a small room for this high end to be in. All right, so the dimension expander is really just like a delay. So it's just going to do early reflections and stuff like that. So it's really all it's good for. I'll also use if I'm really trying to go for like, because like this right now, as it is, I could use this for a lot of shit. I could use it for halftime and drum bass. I probably would use it for either of those, just like I said. So the 808 tone there is a lot. There's too much of it, and that's from the original sample itself. So I want to get a little bit more moving in that, so I'm going to push this pitch envelope just a little bit more. So what I'm doing here is I'm extending the decay and I'm pulling back the amount so I can hear just more subtle movement. So too much amount is going to cut out the entire sample. I can also turn this into warp mode. So because it's warping, because warping's off, it's going to speed up the sample as I change the pitch. So I can turn to complex mode, and now that's not happening. Okay, so this is a pitch down version here. So let's get this one back up. I want to get more low end into this. About there, sounds about 1 octave down. We can even go one step further, and we can go auto filter and high pass. Now use the envelope follower, make that sharp, because it's a really short transient, so we're not really worried about that. And I can push this to the beginner end of the chain, so that's something you can mess with too. That's a lot of low end, dude. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm looking for, actually, though. Okay, now I'm going to put this into medium curve here, because medium curve or hard curve, depending on how drastic you want to be, it's going to normalize. So pushing this line here is going to normalize the signal as it flows through. It's going to make the transient super loud, pretty much push everything up to 0. And that's what I want. So it's a ton of low end, like too much, but I like it being there. So when I do this kind of stuff, I'm just like, okay, that sounds good the way it is right there, but if I pull it back from this point, it's going to lose the resonation. So what I want to do is I want to pull it back after the fact. Instead of change this, I'm going to wrangle it in. So that's when you'll see, like, people doing like, oh yeah, I just did a EQ like that. And, it's just like, well, how did you not, blow up your face? And usually there's like 5 other plugins that are literally canceling out that ridiculous EQ. So it says like sub range, which is kind of good because I want more than enough to work with. Cool. All right, so this is literally giving me the low end pitch now. So now it's tuned with my snare, and I've wrangled it in so it doesn't have all that sub. So because it's resonating though, now I can channel that resonation. I can channel the literal decay that's being resonated into this, channel it into this EQ, which is now retuning it into 180 here. Yeah, so, I mean, just about signal flow here. And then you can, add less or more, whatever. Literally fine tune a taste. And when I'm doing this kind of shit, like, this will definitely be like, sample material. So you're going to be like printing different versions. I will print while I'm tweaking, and then also like throw a limiter on and just kind of like master it, baby master. Let's get Pro L. Pro L is a mastering limiter for mastering things. I say that because some people think it's just like overrated. But these aren't mastering things. So I want things for mastering. So it does the job and it does it well. This is just Pro L1 as well. I'm not playing Pro L2 by accident. Not a really preference based thing here. I just want it to hit 0. But I also want it to be good. Actually hit 0 and be limited at 0. Okay. Just explaining all my thought process here so you kind of get an idea what to do. Okay, so I'm just going to resample this stuff and kind of like tweak it along. Then we're going to go into 909, and then I'm going to start recording stuff. All I'm going to add some more resonation here. Maybe put in more snares post this resonation. So change the snares. It's adding more, but I also have layers here as well, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to add more space. All right, now I'm going to be drastic with the space. I'm going to cut the low end. No high cut. It's going to be really small though. That nice metallic reverb. Okay, so I'm going to add another layer now while I'm recording. I'm going to add a clap layer. And while this sound is kind of neat, I think a little bit less on that metallic. Okay, so let's take that off. I want to give space to this thing now. So I'm going to go, I could go convolution reverb, but I am recording right now, so I don't want to blow up my computer. So let's just try this. Not even my computer, just Ableton. Yeah, the delay effect here. Yeah, I like a little bit of both flavors for it. So, but we are recording this on loop, so we got a ton of snares. And I'm just going to give you guys this whole long recording here. Okay, so we got that layer here. Let's get a 606. So 606s are like really like degraded kind of samples. So I like them kind of as layers sometimes. So it's just being thrown into the mix there, just to kind of like add to the transient. All right, now I'm going to throw in the OTT. Okay, so I have a snare version of OTT. Slightly deleted it. So it's just kind of like where I would keep these kind of like decays at, but then I usually push this up. And then, so say you've done a ton of different things to it. Go for the classic shit that you really like. Start layering the other things again, kind of like the 808. So I'm using these samples just kind of like as tools. But this is a sample I use a lot. So this is like a trap rim shot trap sample. So I'm going to try to get this one into the mix a little bit more. All right, so it's going to release all the way. Let's get this a little bit more in the front. So I'm going to pull the high end out of this a little bit more. But yeah, that's a good first run. Yeah, so pretty much, you know, that used to be an 808 snare, but now it's like a really, really functioning, like high process snare. So what I did again, just kind of like going through the process, just kind of talked about layers that would be good and complementary to the 808 snare or just snares in general. Things that you don't really want to conflict with the overall tonality of it, which is like the pitch. So you want to do things that don't have pitch, meaning noise-based effects like slapping your hands together or snapping your fingers or something like that. Hand-based things, they make noise. They don't make like actual notes and pitch and stuff like that. So that's a good spot for you to start in terms of like what you're looking for in terms of layers. Rim shots are another good spot to start as well. But yeah, so let's go and take this and think about that stuff now with 909s, and then we're going to record. So we talked about a lot of like the really deep concepts with this stuff now, which is like, okay, drop this in. We know we want to do that. We also are in a drum rack almost. So let's put this in a drum rack, group to drum rack, and then get some MIDI going. Okay, so this is the full range of the snare. It's the original pitch, no filtering, nothing. So we want to add more low end. It's the first step. So we're putting more low end in here. We can resonate that in there and then modulate the envelope. Want that quick? Okay, so now we're gonna pull back sustain, make it more like a drum transient. Full release still. .909 is greater than 808, but 808 is greater than 909 in other situations. Really, just like two different snares. 909 really just covers so many different genres that it's really good for everything. But when you're talking like deep dub, and anything else like that, neither of those two are really present. And if you are to use one of them, it will be the 808. And if you aren't, then it's more dubstep, you know, more of the not deep dub. Deep dub is more like, again, dub, not dubstep. Dubstep is having the electro kind of like 909 snare, whereas deep dub is more rim shot based or sample based, dub based. Think about what a dub sounds like. 1010 doesn't exist. They gave up. They stopped counting. Okay, so we have the first piece there. So we have a little bit of resonation, more low end. Let's give it more flavor. Cool. All right, so let's go into compression now. We're gonna do kind of like a layer thing again as well. So we're gonna want to get this one to be snappy. Let's push it about 5, 6. We'll go about here, about 40, 50. All right, I'm just gonna be all the way drastic right now. And now we're gonna go here. Okay, so I'm gonna bring this up to about here. Cool. Okay, so we're gonna glue that. Really just a soft clipper. Really just kind of glue that together. But if you are hitting this too hard, it's going to kind of mitigate your transient, meaning just kind of squish it out. So definitely don't hit it too hard, or else you'll lose a lot of punch. Because you want to step your way into maximum power. You don't want to go all the way max power all the way all the time, because then you're just creating distortion. Unless you want to go and do that and you just go and copy OTTs as many times as possible and then just dry wet that. More power to you. That is definitely a process. Works. I literally just told you it. But you know, if you're trying to make it really, really clean, say like fit a 909 into a drum and bass track that's like Mefgis level or something like that, which Mefgis definitely doesn't really use 909s and I mean does, but for the most part he is like superior drummer, big time samplers and stuff like that. And actually I wanted to show superior drummer and stuff like that, but I think it probably is a little bit too much just for right now. So we're going to be going into that though. Definitely will. Okay, so we got this guy here smacking. Okay, so here's another way to go and resonate more, you know, tonality or just even punch into a sound. And I think I've shown this before, but just to show it again. So call it the perk pinger or whatever. So we just resonate 2 EQs. Okay, so we got 2 EQs both resonating. Okay, so they're both being pushed up. So we want one EQ that's macro, and then we can copy this over. So we're going to do 2 here. So I'm going to right click that, macro it. I'm going to option drag. I want to put this post saturator. So then I'm going to go and pull the scaling of this reversed. So now it's going to kind of resonate this new harmonic that I'm putting in here, but then kind of pull it back. So then we can also turn that on and off. So say if like this is going to be limited, you can go to the map here, right click. This is using your big brains now. Big brain time. Okay, so we're going to go 0%. It's going to be our 0%. Okay. Minimum is 0. Both sides. Then we want to go negative here, positive on the other side. So it's more or less, right? Completely off, completely on, but still being wrangled in the whole time. So pull it back. We don't need to go 200%. We can go neg 100%. Thanks. Thanks for the rack compliment, dude. Cool. All right, so let's pull this back so we can hear it a little bit more. Cool. So I like the saturator in between just so I can shape it and compress it on the way through it, and then wrangle it back after. I like medium curve. It's just my go-to. I personally like it for normalizing. I think hard curve is just a little bit much for a lot of stuff, but I will use it in different scenarios. Yes, hopefully your IQ just raised. So think about this in pitch. So where are you tuning your snare at? And then you can also, put a high pass before this. I wouldn't use this as an EQ. Use this as a resonator. So don't do anything to this that you're trying to like shape the overall sound. Just leave these alone. And I'm just saying that from experience. Don't convolute yourself. So what I mean by that is EQ pre or post. So if you're trying to take out low end, I would take out low end, post the EQ, post resonation. So you have, again, all the stuff to work with before you reduce. It's kind of like my process with art. It's like I like to throw everything at the wall and then cut away at it. That's just me. Everybody has their own process. I'm very like technical and specific with shit. But when I approach making any art, I approach it like a 4-year-old, like for real. And that's my mentality with it, is to throw everything out the window, but know how to do shit. I think it's really, really counterintuitive to not maintain both. Like if you're one side or the other, you're gonna stunt your growth in some type of way. Especially if you are overly technical. That's the dual-edged nature of it. The more you know, the less you do, because you end up getting bogged down by all this information, whatever. That's not really the case if you don't let it be. So you just have to kind of like use it for what it is, and then just kind of do what the fuck you're, thinking at the moment. Don't really think too hard about it. But this is like procedural for me. So when I'm trying to get stuff, like this is where I go. I'm just like, do this thing, do this thing, do this thing. And these are, I guess things I've developed over just like, just being a person who does this kind of shit. Like this stuff's easy for me to do for you guys because I do it all the time just for myself, just because I'm this way. I like to know shit the way it is, not from like hearsay, not from whatever. It's just all about the kind of like literal knowledge, So, take it or leave it. But we got, pretty much everything that was inside of these guides about the 909 stuff. I'm kind of like talking about how to do it in different versions and ways here. And this technique here, I think I picked up from, I don't remember. I think it might have been a Skrillex thing, but which I don't remember where I would have saw it. I think I saw it at Trilogy Studios when he was recording with A$AP Rocky, because I was helping out with that session, and I saw this for like on a couple of his tracks. I thought that was really interesting. But the macro for it just makes it more usable. Yeah, it's subtle. Subtle just drop shit like that. I don't really like to talk about that kind of shit. Okay, so next thing. We have transient designing. So with a 909 snare, transient designers are like king. And you gotta like kind of live by them, really. I like the Native Instruments one. I use that for a lot of shit. But I also use the Waves one for a lot of stuff as well. So either or, really whichever one is kind of like easier for you to use. There's also the kilohertz one as well. I think that one's actually super good too. I think the kilohertz one is kind of OP. But yeah, I like the Native Instruments one because it has a built-in limiter and saturator. So I think that's pretty cool. So really basic too, attack, sustain. So less snares, more attack. Okay, so pushing the threshold here, I'm just experimenting with overdriving it into the glue compressor here before the resonator. But I like the way it's kind of coming through here. So what I'm doing before compression here, because transient design is compression. So I'm choosing to use EQ before compression here because I want less low end on the way into this transient designer. I think that's pretty crucial on the way into transient designers because they become unruly. So like harder to maintain and control. Um, yeah. So this one's pretty good for that. Then also, like if you're trying to tune this with your track, I would start by pitching up or starting, move around the pitch of the original source sample and then start to dial in from there. So, you can also use just this as a straight up guide. So 200 hertz is a good place to start for like dubstep resonation around F to G. So 200 hertz in F would be, or I'm sorry, F around 200 hertz would be 170. So pull that down to 170 here and tune it to F. So we definitely want some of those, like the snares in there, but we want less of like that resonated original body. We want to resonate a new low end that's a little bit more punchy. We can actually turn on DC offset here just because it is running, like a perfect sample through this. So that's going to like make sure that it is, hitting the zero crossing as it's passing through the saturator, which is pretty good if we were trying to resonate a sine wave through an EQ, which could be somewhat random in its phase start. And then this is going to be the final shape here. So this is going to limit the amount of low end that you have. And also can be the final bump that gives you like the perfect tone. So literally just like a subtle bump after this one will kind of like finish the pitch of it. And then fine tune a taste on how long you want it to resonate. All right, so now let's go and layer this with some stuff. They're vengeance claps. Let's skip all those and go straight up 909 clap. 909 claps are actually amazing. Okay, so we can actually do some of the same type of processing here. Sometimes I'll pitch this up as well. Just make it a little bit brighter. But to give it a little bit more whip or like crack, so it like pops through the mix and stuff, push the amount here and then same exact thing. So exactly the same thing as all the other pitch envelopes or envelopes that we're doing for all the other percussion sounds. And then get some space here. Then we can glue these two things together. So we don't want it to like smash it though. We're losing some of the transient here. So we just want it to like hit 0 and be chilling there. So right around here is chill. It's doing like a couple dB of gain reduction, which is about 5, which is fine because we're making up 5 as well. Sweet. All right, let's record this. All right, so I'm gonna pull it back so it's not as like sine wavy. Okay, so sometimes when I'm like recording shit, maybe I want some other like reversed element. And I'm saying like recording shit for like drum stuff or percussion. So I'm gonna grab this 808 one just as a random transient, and I'm gonna grab that and reverse it into this. Sweet. So this is all going into that final sample there. I'm gonna add some pre-delay. Let's get some leaves. So this one is a texture, so I'm going to pull out the low end. This one I don't need that much processing for. It's going to be a layer. All right, now let's get some breaking shit. Go glass. Sweet. So bunch of 909 snares, bunch of 808 recorded snares. That's pretty good, right? Like that would be in a troll face track, right? Pretty much, yeah. Okay, so next thing on the list of things to do, because this probably take the least amount of time, I guess, in terms of like theory and shit. So we just to kind of like rehash what we talked about all the envelopes. Pretty much for every single little piece, going to kind of be the same. You want really percussive transient based envelopes, meaning no sustain and only attack decay. So go with that. Anyways, so I will package these up and throw those snares out for y'all. And now let's record some real snares now, right? And some other shit. For those of you still left here. I know I'm not Kenny Beats, but you know what? One day, I'll be as cool as Kenny Beats, and I'll show you. All right, so have this hooked up here, and I'm using an SM57 with a clip-on mic holder. So it just clips onto the edge of the snare. Just a 57 that's angled down. I like to mic it. Depends on the style. If I was doing metal, which I need like the low end and all the transient, pretty much the perfect snare hit every time, I'll probably angle it or direct it at the center of the snare where impact is. And for anything else, say like R&B, or that's like such a high end level of production with the R&B stuff. That's like it's a standard for stuff that it becomes kind of a miking technique too. So it's like more along the rim, you know, just the overall sound is more tight. So you're going for less of a loose sound. You're not trying to go for this like, you know, the full body of the snare. You just really want the crack of the snare, and then the room's going to fill in all the rest of the gaps on that. Well, yeah, let's see. So we got volume there. So I'm going to turn down my mic while I record this. But let's start with the real snare. And got my brother and his band kind of unlocked to do like a session. We can record that shit live to finish up the audio engineering class finally. Life's been pretty crazy lately, so, you know, gotta do stuff in time. But yeah, so I'm gonna record this and turn off my mic, but I'm still here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do just a few hits where I'm just kind of like hitting it just like one shots, and I'm gonna be hitting it hard, you know. So I'm gonna do a bunch like that, and then I'm also gonna do some rim shots as well. And then I'm going to probably tighten the snares and then do a couple different versions. And I say tighten the snares as in they're loose right now, but I can tighten them up and then make the sound a little bit looser or tighter. I'm sorry. So like, I like both of those sounds. Depends what I'm looking for. Oof. Okay, 1 sec. Let's try this again so you guys can hear it. Technically, I will be able to hear it too. up the snares. Hit the rim. All right, let's get some rolls. Okay. Alrighty. All right. Okay. Sure you guys could hear me on that. Okay. Hopefully everybody can hear me now. It's all good. I think everybody can hear me before. I keep on dinging, like flicking my my septum piercing. Okay, so I got pretty much just direct shots here, and I got the rim shots. I also did a roll. So that's good. So a couple other things I want. All right, so I'm gonna do kind of like weird hits on the snare now, like kind of like stick hits and more rim hits. I'm just gonna kind of like maybe even some like Afro-Cuban rhythms. Let's see. Welcome to my acoustic ensemble performance. It's pretty much just me writhing on the floor with a snare drum. Okay, so pretty much a lot of these hits I've done for like different garage shit I do a lot, which is kind of like hitting the drum on different spots of it while holding it to kind of like change the pitch of like the the more tension and pressure you put on the stick, the higher or lower the pitch of the stick will change. So you can like change where you're holding it and like how hard you're pressing down, and it kind of like changes the pitch of the stick hit. But yeah, so that's some weird shit. So we'll do a real snare there. Kept the recording. Oops. And then now let's go other weird shit. A piece if you got to go. Yeah, make sure you got food. Okay, so let's do Foley snares. Okay, so this is going to be a box full of rice. And then I'm going to hit a couple other things too. I got, what do I got? Bottle of butane. That could be one. Got my keys. Got stuff, dude. I have things. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That'd be so awesome if that's what I did for a living. I guess it is kind of what I do for a living. Actually, no, it is what I do for a living. What am I talking about? Okay, so I got a bunch of different hits here. I got Ricebox over here. Then I put Ricebox on top of snare, started dropping it, and then I started hitting a bottle of butane. Then I put the butane on top of my keys, started hitting the butane bottle on top of the keys. Then I was dropping the keys on top of the snare. So the key drop, though, that one's probably going to be the good stuff. Okay, so I'm going to give out all these samples for you guys to kind of just fuck with. So I'll just put all this shit into a folder, and you can just go and mess with it. But yeah, let's cut up this stuff really quick and kind of work with some things. So let's go Foley here. Then we got the real snare hits. Cool. So start with the real snare hits. Okay, so I mean, it doesn't really matter what resolution you record at. Higher is better, but doesn't matter. Really doesn't. All right, so let's check out the transient. Hear how it sounds. Sweet. So there's a lot of good like crack to it. What I'm not looking for when I'm recording a snare transient, just like looking at this, like what are you looking for? You want a live definition on the transient. Depending on the sound that you're going for, you don't want too much ring out or decay. So just like looking at how long this is, just in time. Transient's still about 20 milliseconds less than. So if say I dragged and dropped this processing chain from like my 909 or something, and see how that kind of lined up here, it can probably give me a similar sound, probably not with the perk pinger, but so we're looking for more, attack and like presence to the snare. So we're definitely going to want some more like in this situation, like this is actually a pretty good transient, but I would definitely want this as a layer to something. And remember, this one was the 909. We got 909 processing chain. We got 909 clap, which is going to be the big 909 snare reverb, and then all the other leave sounds and glass breaking sounds and shit. All right, so we're looking for kind of the defined transient here, but this is definitely taking a little bit out of it. So we want to pull that back because we got the tone from the snare already. What I am wanting to hear in this, and we're going to go into multiband here, is I want to hear more sustain now. So I can also use a transient designer too. So we have the transient designer at the end, and I am pulling back sustain, so I can push that up. Okay, so I want more sustain from this high end here. So we got the transient, the click. So I'm going to push this up. We're going to sustain it. And when you're doing a live sample, it's really important you fade out the ambience. Because if you start to boost up the low end or just the noise floor in general, then you're going to start to hear that, extra noise tail that just gets chopped off. So you want to go and shape your audio as if it was the amp envelope. So again, I'm trying to sustain this, so I wanted to fire the expander and then continually fire it as quick as possible. So that means quick attack, quick release, so it finishes its cycle and then starts to refire.